Thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it for you to be here with us at Alliant Group to talk about what's going on in taxes and with the coronavirus. Um, let's see here. My name is Dean Zerbe, and I'm sorry, we're having trouble with our slides here. If we can go to the next slide. Well, I'm going to just keep on going here. Dean Zerbe, I'm senior counsel, the tax counsel for the Senate Finance Committee previously, and now been with the Alliant Group for 12 years as their national managing director. Also joining me is Kathy Petronchak. There we go. Kathy Petronchak, I'm very pleased to have on here. Just has a wealth of knowledge, background, and experience with the IRS, particularly with small business and self-employed. As you can see, she was commissioner there, and she's got a very good handle on how the IRS works and how they're going to be dealing with all this as well, too. So thank you, Kathy, for joining us. And Kathy, why don't I kind of turn it over to you? If we can go to the next slide. I'd like to discuss, why don't we start off, Kathy, if you can give us just an overview of the Treasury announcement that just came out the other day.
Okay, thanks, Dean, and welcome everyone. Glad to be here with you today. The most recent announcement was Notice 2020-17, of course, that came out providing relief for taxpayers for payment obligations. So it hasn't gone quite as far as we hoped it would, and we're going to get in more details when we go through some questions a little bit later. But you have that notice, and then you earlier had Notice 2020-15 that discussed the high deductible health plans. And we're not going to discuss that much today. But again, with 2020-17, once the president declared the national emergency, they, of course, used the provisions that they could for national disasters and provided an extended payment period. We'll get into later. I don't think it went as far as it could have gone. So it is just extending payment for the 2019 tax return payments that are due April 15th and for the estimated tax payments that are due April 15th. And those are postponed to July 15th. So again, it only relates to income tax payments and self-employment income. So I'll leave it at that, Dean, and we'll go into some and get into more details and commentary on it when we get into our questions.
Right. A lot of these questions that I'm putting in front of you, we've gotten from folks earlier from email blasts that we've sent to keep our partners, our CPA partners, up to speed about what's going on. I think this area has been kind of the major focus of confusion about how payment relates to 415 filing and extensions, and maybe if you can just kind of pound home how this all works in practice, Kathy.
Yeah, so it means you're still going to at least have an estimate. It says, can you file an extension? You can file an extension at April 15th. But as we all know, even when you file an extension to file, you still have to have an estimate of what you may need to pay because you normally would be paying that amount April 15th. And what this notice does is give you until July to pay that. So then it also gives you until July to pay your estimated tax payments.
And just to be clear, too,
it is not a filing extension. So if someone doesn't if they want to file after April 15th, I suggest they file an extension, or they could be subject to a failure to file penalty.
Right. I mean, that's the key thing is it's a payment. And I should have added, by the way, too, if anyone listening has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat line. We'll be happy to take them as we go here, or if we don't get to them before we end this. And we're only going to be on for 25 minutes at most. we'll be happy to get to them later. But right, so it doesn't extend the filing. You can ask for an extension. That hasn't changed. And the extension to payment is regardless. Is that fair to say, Kathy? Meaning you can file on time and you get an extension to pay, under the $1 million. We'll talk about it in a second, or $10 million. Or you can ask for an extension and you still can have another delay to payment. Is that saying it right?
Yes, that's saying it right, and they have encouraged people to file by April 15th.
Yeah.
But again, if you think there's elections or something you might want, I think filing an extension is the way to go, and you can still make the payment in July, just like you would every other year with what you estimated to be your tax due on your return.
Right. They asked the $1 million and the $10 million. Why those? I mean, what does the deferment mean? Obviously, that's nice to have. Regardless, you get to keep the money. But Kathy, I don't. When I'm dealing with numbers, I always find that there's kind of just the magic 8 ball came up with the numbers, but I didn't know if there was a statutory limit or what was maybe any thinking behind why these numbers were chosen.
Hey, your 8 ball decision is as good as I know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it sounds good. I mean, I do think they should have been a little bit kinder towards pass-throughs. I mean, that I get it that the individuals get the pass-throughs, but I don't know. It just seems a little bit hard on that. But right, so it's a benefit of the deferred dollars, and that's great. The only chance that the 4/15 deadline will be extended. I think that would take Congress doing that. My impression has been, I know the AICPA came out and was beating the drums, and we'll talk about it. Some states have been changing their filing deadlines, but I think they seemed pretty dug in to stay at 4/15, they being Treasury, IRS, and I haven't really seen Congress taking up that issue. But Kathy, you've got a closer ear to it. Maybe you've got a better feel for what you think might be happening.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone at IRS. But again, as you say, there have been a lot of calls for it. There's been a lot of pounding on the desk. That's what they asked for before an announcement was ever made. So I'm not sure how they will respond, which it is sort of weird, because if you think about if you just took this and it wasn't a national emergency but a disaster, and just think about Tennessee had the tornadoes the beginning of the month. Well, they extended everything to July 15th, including filing. So to me, it really makes no sense why filing wasn't included in this as well.
Well, that's very perceptive. I think I hadn't focused on that, and you're right. Now that I hear you say that, well, maybe they will look at it. They've already got the authority and they've done it elsewhere. Well, I guess what I'd say is I've not really seen articulated a reason not to do it. Maybe they just thought, well, deferring the payments, really taking care of most of it, and we want to encourage people to file. And I guess they could also say, well, you can always just ask for an extension, so what's it matter? But right, so I just say at the moment it doesn't appear to be in the offing. There's a 90-day extension for payments include extensions, will be penalized for waiting to make payments. Right. Again, this was kind of one of these complicated, or seemingly complicated things. I guess the way I thought of it, Kathy, is that the payment is the only thing that's being extended. You can ask for an extension, but that's not going to, they're kind of separate. They're not going to affect one or the other. You can ask for an extension. You still got July 15th as your pay day, is how that works. And if you don't ask for an extension, it's still July 15th for your payment. Is that your understanding?
Right. There's no interest or penalties. If you want to just make the payment in July 15th, no application to do that. You can just do it. But that's not true for filing. So, again, I just mentioned, if you can't get it, and I understand it's a difficult time, file by April 15th. The safest route is to at least get the extension form filed so that there would not be a failure to file penalty. Because all they've said is they're not going to just failure to pay an interest.
So I thought this was interesting. You and I, Kathy, were just talking about this before we got on the webinar, that a number of states, really just in the last 48 hours, it seems, are beginning to announce delays in filing, delays in payment, or both. California for sure, but I saw Oregon, Washington, Maryland. We were talking about South Carolina just did it, and I kind of wonder if a number of the states will begin to fall in line with that. So we don't have it at our fingertips here, given our focus on the feds, but I do think I'm seeing it more and more, and it feels like more of the states will look to that. But Kathy, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them do conformity. What I would say is we don't have anything on our website, but I mean, the AICPA has put it on the public part of their website. They have a chart of the states. I think they put it up yesterday. So that's probably a good resource to go to check for the states from time to time. Obviously, preparing returns, you could have multi-state returns, but they are trying to put something on. They do have something on their website, and will continue to update it as the states make decisions.
Great. Yeah, and then Treasury anticipating this extension will help. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about other things that Congress could do. But Kathy, I don't know if you've given some thought. I thought you had a very interesting idea that correlates a little bit with something we'll talk about what Congress is going to be doing, is putting checks in the air again. The IRS is going to have to deal with that, but that maybe the IRS needs to breathe in and out a bit before they kind of send out notices and audits. But why don't you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so my thought is that, I mean, this is obviously intended to help give a breather, keep some money in the pockets of these businesses so that they can keep their employees there. And actually, you're going to talk about the congressional action. I mean, the whole thing with that is making sure employees stay employed by their companies. But the IRS sent out a lot of notices, and my thoughts were maybe they need to slow down the notice wagon. And for those of you who practice, you know those notices come out furious and fast, and they don't always have enough time. You can send in a response, and the next notice is there, and then you're just it'll be 60 more days before I review your correspondence. And I think it would be a good time for IRS and Treasury to agree that maybe we don't want to issue more collection notices during the next 60 to 90 days. We don't want to file liens during the next 60 to 90 days. I can envision that some folks who already have installment agreements are probably going to go into default on those. So if they just keep issuing notices and you then have to be distracted to help do responses to those notices and generate correspondence that just keeps getting backlogged, no one wins in this scenario.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I don't know if they have the authority. We'll talk about it here in a bit. Like I said, I don't think payroll tax holiday is in the cards. But I don't know. It appears that I would think that if they have the authority to extend on income tax, they'd have the authority to extend on payroll tax payments. I think that would be quite welcome and be very immediate benefit for businesses trying to stay open and keep people on payroll. And maybe that's something that Treasury could look at as well too.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you see on the horizon that will help in terms of tax relief? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit with the Congress here coming up just in a second here. Why don't you talk? I guess we've talked about the delay of the filing season would be the nicest thing for the CPAs, but anything else, Kathy, that you think of that you talked about the notices already, which I think is a grand idea, but anything else that comes to mind in this area?
Yeah, I just think maybe they, this was a national emergency. They ought to go back and look at how this compares when they have disaster assistance. I mean, there they give extensions on quarterly estimated income tax payments. I mean, we have the question about the June 15th estimated tax payments that don't seem to be covered by the notice. We have the quarterly payroll and excise tax returns due April 30th. I mean, so what they've done is put a little Band-Aid on this, and there's lots of other things that will be due before that
Yeah,
July 15th payment date as well. And so I just think they need to consider that because, I mean, for the CPAs and the small businesses, like, well, you're just helping me here, but also have this. And every day, obviously, the unemployment applications, the numbers this morning were horrifying, right? So,
right.
so small businesses, if they don't know that they've got some relief to try to keep their employees on the payroll, are going to have to take drastic measures. And I think there's some policies that Treasury and IRS could do that might help them weather the storm better.
I think well said, and I think you made an interesting point too about installment that giving relief on that, and of course, offers and compromise are going to be coming in a lot of revising it. We just see huge numbers coming on to the rolls of unemployment, unfortunately. Well, good, very good ideas. So let's talk a little bit here as we finish up about we just got a question about what is the status of scheduled IRS tax audit appointments during this crisis, Kathy, I'm sorry. And what I could tell you is that everything's getting shut down in offices I'm talking to at the IRS, that they're working out of their home. I know they don't have any travel allowed. Do you have any insight further on that, Kathy?
Yeah, well, I know we had an appeals conference yesterday, and it was by conference. The issue is, the agents, they obviously have the ability to work from home, and many of them already work from home, telework. But then getting information to them, if they don't change their email and protocol so that we can send stuff, I guess they'll let us send stuff. They just won't send stuff back to us. Because that stuff needs to be looked at. So I think they're trying to figure it out. Hopefully there will be new information. I will say we were successful in getting a revenue officer. There's been no broad IRS pronouncements, but last week I had an elderly client. I was supposed to meet with a revenue officer, and he was a little afraid to go into the office, not knowing who might be there. So they just said, well, let's just touch base in about 3 weeks and we'll reschedule. So they were willing to work with us. So I think there will be some flexibility, but it would help if they came out with a pronouncement about what they intend to do for those appointments and IDRs. Yeah.
I know tax court just shut down, so they just put that on their website. So yeah, I think you're right, Kathy. Either they're not around, and certainly in person is going to be, I think, massively curtailed. And right, hopefully folks will be flexible. On the congressional side of things, we have the bill that just got passed. This is the tax. It has a number of provisions in it, but perhaps relevant for folks here listening is the tax credit that's been put in place. It's kind of a hop on one foot, wear a pink dress and put a bow in your hair kind of a provision. It's about $104 billion over just really 1 year. It expires this year. So it's nothing small potatoes, certainly in terms of the dollars, but it's essentially the sweet spot is for employers between 50 and 500. It actually goes down to zero, but the Department of Labor Secretary can waive that to 50. I'm assuming he's going to do that. But basically, provides a credit. It requires those employers in that bandwidth to provide sick leave and family care leave, and gives a credit for them doing that. It's up to $511 per day for sick leave up to 2 weeks, $200 a day for employee family leave up to 2 weeks, and then kind of another 8-10 weeks on top of that. It encompasses, obviously, the sick leave is you yourself are sick, and if you're taking care of someone who is sick, that's more broadly defined. Then it's $200 a day. If you're taking care of a child who's home from school, and I think all children are now home from school, including preschool, it's $200, but it's got to be your own child. So grandparents that take care of a child that it's their dependent, it wouldn't count. And it also covers self-employed as well too. So it's pretty encompassing in a lot of ways for your clients, your small medium business owners. But it's I guess I'd say to you honestly, it's not maybe the most straightforward. I think there's some gaps and what have you. It's going to be a bit of a joy for you all accountants listening to kind of work through this with your clients. So I wish you good luck on that. The second thing that's coming now is, if you've heard it, the president's talked about having $1 trillion package. 500 billion of that, rough and ready, is anticipated to be what when I was on the Senate Finance Committee and we did 2 rounds of this, it was kind of called checks in the air. So they're looking at doing more checks in the air. I think it's kind of been all over the place, but I think where they've settled on is $500 per child and $1,000 per adult. There was kind of a bidding war momentarily for folks to give even more, but it's usually are. There's also been a rumor that they're going to phase this in based on income. I don't think I can't imagine them really doing that. That would seem to be fairly nonsensical in terms of trying to respond to people's needs. So I think they'll do that. I think so. They'll put that together. I think it's going to take several weeks to get the checks out there. I think they've made some ambitious proposals of timing, but I wouldn't be so certain of that. Last time it took a few weeks to get out rounds 1 and then rounds 2 of these checks. And Kathy, kind of to your point, and you can speak to this. I mean, the last time, this is the devil for the service, because not only have you got to mechanically get the checks out, or they're going to try to do wires, what they're going to do more over deposits, I beg your pardon. But then you've got to deal with all the people calling up saying, well, where's my check? My husband didn't get one. You get it. There's going to be 1,000 versions of questions, and the service is going to have to deal with all that. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts or take on that, Kathy.
Yeah, every time I understand there's not another agency, but every time they make IRS responsible for this kind of stuff, I mean, if I recall, I was already gone from the service, but like 2008, I think people who hadn't filed a return then had to turn around and file a return, even though they didn't meet filing requirements, for IRS to know they should send them a check. I mean, so if there's not a tax return, to your point, if they got a refund, which a lot of people get a refund, they might have bank account information to send it to. But for folks who want to make sure they owe a little bit at the end of every year, there's not a bank account. So then there's paper checks going in the mail. And then for those who didn't have a filing requirement, how do they even know about them?
Right. So good timing. I know they're looking at the Social Security information. They're looking at other government assistance programs. But yeah, it's a joy. So hopefully they'll also give the IRS. I think historically we've given money to the IRS to help administer all this. It's not been a lot of money, but they've done that. So that would help as well too. The other side of it, kind of the business side of it, if you will, I think they're still struggling, and that may not take the form of tax necessarily. They're looking at loan guarantees, just straight out grants to various industries. The one that I think things I've heard about percolating are the idea of allowing NOLs to be used more, kind of clawing back what we did on NOLs in the taxpayer, the tax reform bill. So looking at NOLs, allowing acceleration of NOLs, all things that they might put into play on the tax side. We had put out an idea more long-term to encourage an increase to the R&D credit if you do domestic production, to kind of bring some of the supply chain back to the U.S. as we're all finding out how much of our drugs are manufactured overseas, as well as our spare parts, our supply chain for auto. All that's kind of come home, and so the idea would be to encourage that. I wrote about it in Forbes recently for those who are interested in that issue. But I think there's a few things they're looking at, but I don't know much beyond that, what might be out there. Like I said, I think they're thinking more grants, loans, those types of things might be more palatable and easier to go on. Kathy, I don't know, maybe if you picked up anything or have any ideas in this same space of what Congress might do on the business side.
Yeah, I don't know, but well, we do have a question, Dean, about what do we see for employers over 500, and at least what's come out, they're kind of left out of the sauce here. I mean,
yeah, right. I think the thinking, and I'm not trying to justify it on the 500 or greater, the in terms of the earlier provision that just passed and the credits, the thought was twofold. One, I guess there's certain mandates regarding sick leave and paid sick leave and what have you, so that they were covered in that regard. So that's what kind of was driving the train there in terms of just focusing on the small and small medium businesses. So right, the 500 plus are not subject to the mandates, nor are they getting the benefit of the tax credit. And I don't think they're going to do anything more on that. I don't see them expanding that, at least at the moment. I have not heard of that. So I appreciate everyone. If you've got questions for us down the road, feel free to reach out to us. I think I can get, there we go. There's our email information that you can use. So feel free to touch base with us. And obviously Alliant Group's happy to help you in any way during these tough times. I know it's a lot of strain, so we appreciate you taking 30 minutes out of your day to spend them with us. And again, if there's anything I or Kathy can do, we're pleased to do it for you. Kathy, I'll let you have the last word.
Yep, I just appreciate folks showing up today. I know there's a lot of unknowns here, and I guess, we have some outline here, and the devil's going to be in the details, because even, the stuff you covered, Dean, how that actually plays out, what kind of records do you have to have, what proof, or is there any proof, all of that's going to be real difficult. So I think we'd want to keep folks updated in the upcoming days as we find out more information.
Yes. Very good. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.